So now that we've seen a game from Joshua Dobbs that feels a little more sustainable, just how far does this thing go? Is this our QB of the future? Let's hash it out on Locked On Vikings.
You liked it on 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, you can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, including SiriusXM, where you can also find live broadcasts of all the Vikings games. You can go listen to Paul Allen on there. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. And by the way, if you are watching on YouTube, stick around to the very end and you will get redirected to the Locked On Minnesota Sports 24/7 live stream where Locked On Wolves, Wild, Twins, Vikings, Locked On Minnesota Sports like flagship shows all are on a constant loop playing over and over on that feed. It's like a Locked On Minnesota Sports TV channel. You can just like have on it. It'll just play through all the shows of the day for you. So you can check that out as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50+ infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's Jase, Jase Medical.com. Today is Twitter Tuesday, which means I am answering your questions. You can send them to me anytime at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. Send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. There's a Google form in the show notes. Leave me a YouTube comment, whatever you want. First question that I am answering today, there's a whole bunch of versions of this, so we're going to talk a lot about this. First version of it comes from Dang, who asks, do you think Dobbs is doing well enough for them to keep Hall on the bench the rest of the way? He was looking pretty good before his concussion, but it'd be hard to pull Dobbs unless he has a disaster game. Somebody else asked, what would it take for Dobbs to go out? And I think a disaster game is a pretty good way to put it. So I think you kind of answer your own question here. I think it would take like a catastrophe thing. I think we're on this Ryan Fitzpatrick track right now, where Fitzpatrick has so many examples where he would come in, he would play great for a couple of games, and then he'd have his, 4 interception meltdown. And then after that 4 interception meltdown, you get pulled and you're the backup again, and you just kind of have this up and down. I think that is the track that we have. Like, we have to treat it that way, right? Where he has earned the next game. Kevin O'Connell said in a press conference on Monday, Dobbs is a starter. We maybe get Jaren Hall back from concussion. They're expecting him back to finish out the protocol this week, but Dobbs is a starter. Seems good, right? And we just take it game by game. And I don't think we have to decide who the starting quarterback is for week 16 right now, right? Let's just take it game by game. There's nothing wrong with that. And personally with Dobbs, I'm ready to follow him to the ends of the earth. Like, I love this dude. I am so ready to go like to hell or high water with him. But we don't have to make this decision holistically for the entire season, right? There's no reason not to just make this a week by week deal unless we want to get a lot more aggressive about it. And Jack kind of is taking it there. Let's say they play really well with Dobbs and finish the season in the 10 to 12 win range. Would our front office stick with Dobbs, or would their thinking be more imagine how much better we could be with a starting QB and then attempt to draft a rookie? So to be honest, we still don't know Kwesi that well. Like, we know him as we've known him for 2 years, and we know some of his principles and some of the things that he says like all the time. And I think a big thing for Kwesi is flexibility. So I think he would take the offseason as it comes. You'd probably say, okay, Dobbs, we'll sign you to a 1-year deal. We'll see how the draft goes. We'll see how free agency goes. We'll see how negotiations go with Kirk Cousins. And we'll just sort of like leave everything open and on the table and deal with each situation individually. So what I'll say to that is, if that happens, I think Dobbs gets a contract. But I don't know if he's anointed with the starting job because, hey, who knows? Maybe the quarterback you were totally enamored with falls to you because everybody gets worried that nobody went to his birthday party, right? That kind of crap happens in the draft, and you want to be open. You want to leave yourself open to that line if that is how things fall. You want to leave yourself open to all opportunities. Ryan L. says, do you think it's fair to say that the Vikings have gone from a QB who is underrated by fans of other teams to one who is overrated? I love Dobbs with some of his plays, make me nervous that results might not be sustainable. So the sustainability of the thing is like the other part of this. How much can we expect? And that is the deal of like where I'm at with Dobbs now. I'm 100% game to just roll with Dobbs until you get a reason not to. And the question becomes, are we going to get a reason not to? Or is he going to string together 7 awesome games? And we're going to be like, oh my God, we actually maybe have to make this dude the starter, right? Like there is a standard of play that Dobbs can play at that just make us realize, oh my God, all the other teams messed this up and he actually is just here and is perfect. He has a history of having like crazy meltdown. I mean, the game right before he got traded to the Vikings was this crazy meltdown, horrifying interceptions against the Ravens. So let me see some games where let me see a string of games where that doesn't happen, right? Last week, my challenge was my bar to clear was, can you play real quarterback and not just be like in improvisational schoolyard mode and in a more sustainable way? He did it in a more sustainable way. So now you got to sustain it, right? So give me 3-4 games of this and we can start having greater conversations. Now we're talking about, okay, you got to start for the week. That's what you earned with that game. Now string together 4 and we can start talking about sustainability. But there is no reason that nothing about Dobbs's play has proven sustainability because it's impossible to do that in one game, right? To prove that you sustained it, you got to sustain it. F3Z asks, Hicks might be out for a while with that shin injury. Do you think Pace can cleanly take over his role in snap count? I do not. I do not think Pace is built for the Jordan Hicks role, which is a lot more physical, requires a lot more size. He's a different kind of linebacker that does different things, and that's okay because we got some news. The Vikings brought back Anthony Barr, signed him into the practice squad, probably plan to elevate him for a little bit. I think you get 3 elevations now for a guy, or it might be 2. So you basically have Barr for 2 or 3 weeks, and you can put him in that Jordan Hicks role. He's a quick study, right? He's a veteran with a lot of experience, and you don't need to ask him to be particularly fast, which when it comes to Barr being an older player than what he used to be, and by the way, all the nostalgia of this absolutely rules. Barr can be a catastrophe and absolutely suck. I don't care. Still happy with it. It rocks. This is just fun. I don't care how well he plays at all. But to try to project that, the hope is that he still has more of his strength from his athletic prime than the speed, and then we can put him in situations where, you're the Sam, you're the Mike, you're fitting the run. Maybe you got to drop into a hook zone, but we're never going to make him the runner in Tampa 2 where he's got to run with a wide receiver or anything like that. And that was roughly the same strategy we had employed with Jordan Hicks. My guess is that that's what they do. But I don't think that you want to try to put Ivan Pace in that situation. You want to have him doing stuff with a little bit more range and asking him to do stuff with a little bit more like running start, popping guards, doing what he does there. James Kunow asks, has there been a consistent culprit for why the Vikings keep letting their opponents catch back up to them? Okay, so a bunch of people asked about the conservative play calling and all of that, and I think part of it is, if you think about that last game, I don't think we need to have a problem with the Saints comeback because it wasn't really real. There was no real point, at least by win probability models. It only felt like that game was in danger, but it felt like it was in a lot more danger than it actually was. And some of that is playing into the Vikings strategy where they're playing for win probability, not the scoreboard, right? There's no difference between winning 27-19 and winning, 35-10, right? Both of them are wins. Projection wise, if you want to do point differential and all that stuff and try to do math and make a better bet on that, you're allowed to, but ultimately they don't count for anything different. So strategically, there's no reason to pursue one over the other. So long as you are pursuing more win probability. I'm going to go on a tangent here. There's a documentary I just watched called AlphaGo from a few years ago that covers the story of an AI that was trained to get good at a game called Go. It's the oldest game in the world. And it did by kind of specifically exploiting that strategy by saying, I don't need to win by a lot. I need to have a high probability of winning. I'll take a 99% chance to win by 1 over a 50% chance to win by 30. So some of that conservative strategy is angling directly at that. Now, does it actually achieve that aim? I think is highly debatable. I won't get into it. But I guess that's the strategy that I'm thinking of. And then some of it is just when they get a lead, they've just had bad plays when they get a lead. Like they just miss some run blocks, man. Like, come on, you can't do that. But that like hyper conservative turtle thing did bring the Saints comeback a little bit. I just don't think the Vikings are really gonna be that mad about it. I got a lot more questions here, and I want to make sure I get to them. I got a ton of questions, and I want to answer them all. They're all very good. I love you all very much, so thank you for giving me them. So let's keep this rolling in just a bit. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical, and in particular, their Jase case, which has 5 life-saving antibiotics that can treat 50-plus infections. It is a very clutch thing to have in your first aid kit at home, because you just don't know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen and how inconvenient it's going to be. If something does happen that requires that you need that kind of antibiotic treatment, look, you don't know if that's going to be in stock at the pharmacy. We got supply chain stuff going on all over the world. You might not even be able to get to a pharmacy depending on where in the world you live. Or it could just be the kind of thing where it's hard to get an appointment and you don't have the time to wait. You got to have that stuff on hand. So take preparedness into your own hands and don't let the unexpected get the best of you. Go to jasemedical.com and you can fill out a simple online form, and maybe you have to jump on a quick call with a board-certified physician and use promo code LOCKEDON. You can get $20 off of a purchase of a Jase case. That's promo code LOCKEDON at Jase, Jase medical.com. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second thing, I would love it if you checked out patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL and watched my pass protection tutorial thing. It's free to watch. You can all go see it. You can also go see the Atlanta Josh Dobbs episode. If you want to go look at that from last week, that is now free, but I really like the pass protection one. You can learn a thing about how pass protection works in the NFL beyond just guys try to block, right? You can learn like the strategies and the calls. I'm very happy with it. Next question I'm going to answer comes from Gary Treeman, who asks, Blackman played about half the game. Are they asking him to be a real big boy corner, or is he kind of being hidden with minimal responsibility? So for me, the idea of hiding a corner means having him play squat. I think that's how you really hide from a matchup on the perimeter is cover 2. And then the guy just has to play an underneath zone, because anything deep, anything high leverage, anything that's like difficult, you get to pass off. And that means the underneath stuff that's difficult to cover, like slants, you can play a lot more aggressively, because you know that if it's a slant and go, that it's no longer your responsibility. So you can get burned by that all you want. That's why you get like quotes like the Mike Zimmer famous, you can find a cover 2 corner at 7-Eleven thing, because that's the easiest thing. The easiest coverage assignment that exists for a cornerback in NFL football. I think quarters is harder, 3 is harder. Cover 1, of course, is the hardest it gets. That's just pure man coverage. And I don't think there's a lot of cover 2 on those really at all. I mean, there's Tampa 2, I guess, but with the Vikings, you'll never get somebody just playing squat when it's cover 2. All the corners, because they invert so much, those corners have to go play half safety as well. They have to back way off and then start like reading and reacting and breaking on things. And when it comes to cornerback in off-man coverage, you don't get to hide anybody. So if he's on the field when you're blitzing, which he is plenty, the offense is now deciding who gets exposed, right? Because they're deciding which matchups to target, and the Saints targeted Blackman plenty, and he made good on those with the interception on a really bad throw by Jameis Winston, but still punished mistakes, right? As well as a pretty good pass breakup or 2. So I would say feels pretty real to me. I'm going to watch it a little closer. I haven't gotten through the defensive tape yet, so I'll watch it a little closer, and if anything really sticks out, I'll get back to you, but it feels fairly real to me. The other thing about this, and this is a question from Nolan M., who asks, over the offseason, you mentioned on several occasions that a Flores defense needs solid corners to function. I would say that it has been functioning above expectation at this point. Yeah, you're right. Do you think this is because our corners are actually that talented, or because Flores has found other ways to work around what I believe to be an average corner room? So I think I was just wrong. I think I just was wrong about Flores' defense. I think it protects corners more than I was really giving it credit for, because it compresses time to throw so much. So playing in off-man coverage when everybody is blitzing, that thing's going to be short, and it really exposes a corner's ability to tackle as much as it exposes and it like exposes their ability to cover less than other defenses. You still have to cover, but tackling is taking a lot of that burden, your tackling ability. And they've been really, really good at that, from Metellus to Bynum to Booth, Blackman. Haven't had to do it as much, but have done well when they had to. Byron Murphy, Caleb Evans, of course, him tackling, getting better at tackling has been a whole story. So I think that is how they've made this cornerback group feel a lot better than it should be on paper, is because those guys are well coached, good tacklers, and the defense makes it come down to tackling a lot. Landon Renly says, it seemed like since Kirk has gotten hurt, CJ Ham's usage has dropped. Is that just a matchup thing, or does it have to do with having a more mobile QB? So I looked this up, and it has not. His snap counts are about the same as they used to be. It probably just feels different because it's a different offense. But key thing to remember here is that CJ Ham is the running back, is the third down running back. He's been the one blocking on third downs, on third and can't run, third and long enough where you can't run. It's always CJ Ham. So that's going to buoy his snap counts quite a bit. Nick Poe says, I feel like we are seeing a lot less 21 and 11 personnel, more TJ out wide. Any truth to this? Again, I looked into it and not really a pattern. The amount of 12 personnel is about the same as it was. Josh Oliver plays about half the snaps. It was obviously different last week in terms of which tight ends were out there, but again, CJ Ham snap counts are the same. The 11 personnel snap counts is a little harder to go player by player with, I guess, because all the wide receivers got hurt. TJ being out wide oscillates too. He's been out wide 9 times some games, 1 time some games, and there doesn't seem to be much of a pattern to it. Just game plan by game plan. Seth asks, Jalen Naylor played the second most snaps of all receivers and tight ends. How's he looking out there? Okay, so I actually am looking into this for a bigger project, and I'll tell you this much. He was not allowed to contribute a lot. I don't mean that to say that that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, or it's definitely not a referendum on Naylor. Someone's got to be the fourth guy in the progression, and he just kind of was all day in this game. He ran, I charted 43 passing plays, or plays that he was a part of, I guess, that weren't just like straight up runs or smart POs in there that ended up being runs. And the most common thing he did by far was the backside basic. Which is usually the third or fourth thing in the progression. Dobbs never got there in the progression, or the times when he did get there were not the ones that Naylor was open on. But I will say, I thought he did an okay job of getting open on those. Certainly it's not a reason for concern at all. Sometimes you, as wide receiver, you just got to sort of grin and bear it on a cardio day. And Naylor had a cardio day, a lot of clear outs. The second most common thing that he did was run a go. That wasn't really part of the progression. So the offense just ran through Addison and Hawkinson. I will say that that's a really good argument for calling Brandon Powell the wide receiver 2 right now instead of Naylor. Even though Naylor got more snaps, he got those snaps because of blocking, which very similar to the KJ Osborne, Jordan Addison dynamic. Hawks Bulbous Keister asks, Booth and Ingram graded out well. Are they ascending? I think with Booth, it's kind of the same thing as Blackman, except he's just not getting tested as much for reasons that are sort of outside his control and just part of the game, right? There are 5 wide receiver cornerback matchups in like a given man coverage rep, and only one of them gets the target, no matter how many of them lose. So nothing too crazy there, but I haven't seen any like crazy L's for Booth either. And I think Ingram has steadily improved. He sort of cemented the guy that he was in the playoff game last year. Ingram was great in the playoff game last year. And I think that while he still is not consistent enough and will take some L's that will make you want to tear your hair out, they're getting less and less. And yeah, I think he's kind of coming into his own as like a starting guard. I've got a lot more questions. They get a lot less serious from here, and I know that you're going to get excited about that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're new to FanDuel, you've been thinking about getting into gambling, you should go to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now and place any moneyline bet you want. Pick any straight up winner on any, can be any basketball game, can be any football game. Go get a hockey game if you want. And if you win that moneyline bet and you signed up via FanDuel.com/lockedon, you get $150 back in bonus bets. It's a $5 money line bet on even the most obvious winner ever. You can just go pick the double-digit favorite of your choice and you can get 150 back. 30-1 odds on that. No deal like it out there. FanDuel is a great place to do your gambling. They've got spreads, player props, over-unders, so much more. Safe and secure app, and they pay out instantly when you win. Once again, that is FanDuel.com/LockedOn for $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Moving right along with this episode of Locked On Vikings. Mario asks, with so much talk of the run game and running back injuries, I'm curious, how much value did Jefferson and Osborne add in the run game? I think Jefferson adds a certain value because you get a ton of too high, and it's just easier to run against two high safeties, right? Versus one high safety, because there's one less dude in the box. It's a better numbers game. So that's part of it. It's sort of an indirect impact. But both of those guys do a pretty good job blocking on like cat blocks and dart blocks, which is the Shanahan system's word for the blocks that wide receivers do, or dart can sometimes be an RPO. But it's the blocks that they do where they kind of have to run to the inside and dig somebody back out, and they both do a decent job. That's like the running back blocking role, or at least it's not perfect. I mean, they're not like Cooper Kupp out there, who's a phenomenal blocker, but they're doing better than you're getting right now from like Brandon Powell. But what I will say is they've gotten some fantastic wide receiver blocking in this Saints game out of N'Keal Harry. And I think that is the kind of thing. I mean, look, get the block, get the rock, right? That's how you get a bigger role. Stephen Hall asks, do you think Jefferson being out actually helped KOC and the team in terms of both play calling creativity and overall balance? I mean, obviously that's a hot take. And he went on to say, like, obviously it's not like good to lose Justin Jefferson or anything, but there's something to this where it's like, it was healthy to be challenged that way. Maybe that's the diplomatic way to put it. Obviously the offense would have produced more with Jefferson in. I don't think that you can argue otherwise. But I think the offense that it will produce once Jefferson is back will be better than it would have been without that absence, because they've learned some valuable lessons. You gave Jordan Addison space to really explode the way that he did. You gave TJ Hawkinson space to explode, and you kind of were able to find, especially in the turmoil of losing Kirk Cousins and having to figure out quarterback, you were able to find a rhythm that isn't just overly relying on one guy. And it feels like when Jefferson does come back, they can they can target him 15 times, and maybe they should, but the fact that they don't have to is very nice and can help prevent some of the easiest solutions to their offense. Kyle Umtvet asks, we haven't seen JJ in an offense without Kirk yet. Given he and Dobbs obviously don't have the chemistry that he and Kirk had, do you see JJ getting his normal ratio of targets, or do they stick to spreading it around given all the weapons and just let his targets come naturally? Well, ain't that the $1 million question, right? Do they still manufacture things? But I do think that that's less of a Kevin O'Connell question and more of a Josh Dobbs question. Some of the like force-feeding Jefferson stuff, it wasn't like a directive. It was just Kirk Cousins deciding, hey, here's a JJ matchup and I'm going to throw it. And he has the leeway to decide that. Dobbs will have the same option. So the $1 million question is he going to approach it the same way? I'll be curious to learn, right? And it depends on what sort of matchups you like and how well you know those guys. But Dobbs doesn't know KJ Osborne really any better than he knows Justin Jefferson, than he knows Jordan Addison, right? So which guys that he really gravitates to, and how much he gravitates to Jefferson versus how much he gravitated to Kirk, that will be interesting to find out. Scoliosis asks, does Hunter's role in this defense and his phenomenal run defense explain his lower pass rush win rate numbers compared to Garrett, Watt, and Crosby? Or are they just better pass rushers? Super possible that those guys are just better pass rushers. I'm not going to play the ranking games today. I will say pass rush win rate is a stat that I don't really put a lot of stock into. It is, as far as I understand, getting within a yard of the passer counts as a pass rush win, or I think getting behind the passer counts as a pass rush win. And that rigid definition can ruin reps that actually are pass rush wins. This especially happens for defensive tackles, guys like Harrison Phillips that are just kind of asked to push the pocket, but not necessarily get within a yard of the quarterback. That's really close, but just to compress the space a little. And if they do that enough, you're perfectly happy, but it won't count as a pass rush win. And the same thing happens on the edges for sure. I don't like that stat. I don't put a lot of stock into it. I don't need it to evaluate Danielle Hunter. I don't need it to know that Danielle Hunter is good. That said, those other three guys are really, really, really good as well. So put them in whatever order you want. I'm not going to come to your house and yell at you over it. Rob Meek asks, a month ago, some people wanted a fire sale, believing a young QB would fit nice with the core of the team. Is it safe to say a fire sale was reactionary? Man, it was safe to say that when it was happening. Fire sale was always crazy overreactionary. And look at what happened at the trade deadline. Like, not a lot, right? You had Washington traded away a couple of edge rushers, and that was like kind of it in terms of like high octane moves, right? Everybody talks about the trade deadline, and I think a lot of it especially comes from people who don't just cover football. When you cover other sports and you see the NBA trade deadline and the MLB trade deadline and the NHL trade deadline, those are crazy, wheeling and dealing all over the place. They happen later in their respective seasons, so teams like know a little bit more that they're out. But I mean, look, when you're 3-5, it's really hard to look at the trade deadline and say, all right, let's sell everybody off. Who knows? Maybe we'll rip off 2 wins. We'll be back to 500 and we'll feel pretty good, right? You never know when a 5-game win streak is coming. I know nobody predicted this one for the Vikings, right? So of course it was never going to happen because teams just don't know. They just can't predict the future that well. When you're 3/4 of the way through the NBA season and you're out of the playoff race, then yeah, it gets a little easier to do that. That's always the case. And guess what? Next year, the trade deadline is going to get overhyped again. There's nothing any of us can do about it. Purple Velour says, has Byron Murphy earned an extension in your eyes? He signed a 2-year deal, so I don't think that that's going to be a priority or anything. Would I be happy with him as the cornerback going on for the foreseeable future? Yeah, sure. He's playing pretty well, but we're going to have so much more information than we do now when we actually have to make that decision that it doesn't really feel like it's worth paying much attention to right now. He's doing fine. Nate says, how much of the offensive line's resurgence in 2023 do you attribute to Chris Cooper? The coach always owns some portion of his players' performance, right? I mean, ultimately it's the players that have to go out and do it. But yeah, I mean, the unit feels pretty well coached to me. I do think they had a rougher game communication-wise against the Saints, which as the coach, you also have to own some of that, right? But I would say as much as you would always attribute to a coach, I don't think that there's anything specific there. And Chris Cooper was here last year when this same group of people was struggling. Goggles asks, realistically, how unreasonable can I be with my expectations now this season? Do I need to break the glass in case of optimism? Okay. So here's what I'll say to this. I think what I've realized is that my outlook on a football season has nothing to do with my expectations for it. Whether I think it is a season where we will win the Super Bowl or whether I think it's going to be a season where we'll just be mid or whether I think it's going to be a bad season, all of those are still enjoyable to me, because I can at least be like academic about it, right? Obviously, it's more fun when the team wins and I want them to win, but I don't need to place expectations on the season, and then cling to them, right? And hang on to them as my only thing keeping me from falling down a chasm. So that's where I'm at. That said, I don't know, be as unreasonable as you want. I'm not the cops. Purple and Orange asks, as both a big Bronco and Vikings fan, how do I watch this game, which I will be attending, without being destroyed by the outcome? Man, you're going to be outside on a November evening in Denver watching football. Who cares who wins, man? Have a good time. Have a hot dog and a beer and enjoy it with whoever you're seeing with. That's sounds like a great way to spend a Sunday night. Adam Kleinsaucer says, if Josh Dobbs can lead us to the promised land, will you get another rabbit and name it Dobbs? Got to run that by the fiance. Not sure how she'd feel about that, but Dobbs as a bunny name, this is not bad. Yeah, Dobbs. Hoppy Dobbsy. I don't know, Dobby. I think we can do better. And finally, Carlos School says, Game of the Year 2023, Baldur's Gate 3, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. You strike me as an RPG guy. I feel like you've insulted me. I feel like saying you strike me as an RPG guy is like a devastating thing to say to someone. It's like saying you look like you play a string instrument. It's like, what do you mean by that? I'm just kidding. I looked at the Game of the Year nominees. The only one I played is Zelda, so I'll go with that one. If you have questions for me, you can always ask me, of course, at Luke Brown NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. Tomorrow we'll get back. I'll circle back on some of these film-related questions, some of the stuff everybody else asked me. And if your question got cut for time, I am very sorry. We'll do that, and then later in the week, we go into Broncos mode. So get excited for that. I'll see y'all then, and as always, Skull.